I believe that either a capital L or a lowercase l will win the White House within 18 years. But it's unlikely that in 2 years a capital L is going to do it. So it's up to us to stand up for our principles. And that's why I'm proposing this platform. The second plank is unilateral nullification. In other words, you opt out so that going forward you're not subject to federal supremacy, but looking back you can nullify anything that's on the books through your own state legislation. We're going to sunset the IRS. If you want to raise money, you've got to go through the states. We're going to sunset the Federal Reserve System. We're going to replace monetary policy at the discretion of the Fed with a constant rule for money supply growth. We're going to cap government spending. We're going to end discretionary war by requiring any military action to have a declaration of war and make it subject to a vote of 2/3 of the states.
Oh, you mean like it's supposed to be?
Yes! Now you get the connection to what I said at the beginning. We are the descendants of the people that founded this nation. If we're putting forth an idea that sounds new to us, we're probably doing something wrong. It's going to sound new to everybody else. But it shouldn't sound all that completely new to us. We need to privatize the way, at the state level, we need to privatize the way that we control police. As an officer myself for the past 11 and a half years until some months ago, I feel very strongly about this. The way we manage police officers has to change. We need to make it much more like other industries. We can talk about that. We need to privatize education. And that means making funds available for competition and allowing public schools to sunset in a free and open market. We need to stand up for bodily autonomy. If I say anything that sounds wacky, you know you're listening to the wrong talk, because this is bread and butter libertarian stuff, right? Corporate autonomy. You can't be regulating a group of people any different than you would regulate an individual. That means no bailouts, no taxes, no regulation that an individual would be subject to. And we need to end mandatory transactions. Social Security being the leading example, but there are any dozens of others, right? But the reason I think we have such a good opportunity is because things are so bad. They're bad for a couple of different reasons that I think a lot of folks in the American public are beginning to recognize, and that's our opportunity. Things are bad in terms of authoritarianism. Remember where, let's never forget, remember where authoritarianism in a democracy comes from. It comes from someone telling you that you should be more fearful of the other guy or gal coming to power than you should be for losing your Constitution or your individual rights. It comes from fear, right? It comes from fear of a pandemic and a fear of terrorism and a fear of drugs and a fear of crime and fear of all kinds of things that government officials want you to be afraid of, and therefore vote for me. Bring me to power no matter what. And you see this from both the red and blue parties now, right? Unabashedly, they talk about manipulating not just the Senate, who cares? They talk about manipulating the Supreme Court. They talk about manipulating elections. Remember, Donald Trump may be the best and loudest at claiming he's the legitimate one who lost. But he's not the one who invented that concept. Right? It was Hillary before that. And she didn't invent it either. Right. It's all, but it's accelerating, getting louder, and getting worse, I would argue. And more brazen. Right? Joe Biden didn't invent the idea of court packing. And the Republicans didn't invent the idea of not pushing through the other party's nominee. But it's more brazen now. It's more out in the open. The parties will do anything to keep the other one out of power. That's almost definitionally authoritarianism. That's where it's coming from. The reason it's an opportunity for us is not just merely per se it's so awful, although I believe that's a bit of an opportunity itself, but because people recognize it more than they used to. It's an opportunity also because both parties are less loved than they used to be. In no small part because of their hatred for the other. Each party has left behind its platform. When I was a kid, I'm pretty sure I'm the oldest one in the room by a chunk. What year were you born?
47.
Holy shit, really? You look good. All right, it's the second oldest in the room, I will say. When I was growing up, and back me up here, the parties had platforms. I mean, I wouldn't argue they had strict principles, right? But now, the number one thing each one represents is keeping the other one out of power. JR is right. I was a professional economist for 20 years. I was a police officer after that for 12 years. All of the plans have to be backed up. Okay? This is not a campaign like other libertarian campaigns. If you're on a bus going from town to town in the United States, you're not actually running for president. You might be doing something good, you might be doing something useful, you might be doing something wonderful, but you're not actually running for president. The United States is still driven by TV media, a little bit less than it used to be. We've got social media, we've got Joe Rogan, right? We've got all these other important channels. But credibility still comes from big, splashy spending. If you raise $500,000 one day, you need to spend it by 4 p.m. You need to spend it now. It has to be someone with a background that tells the rest of America, this person you could at least imagine going all the way. It might be a stretch. But if you can't imagine a candidate being a credible threat to go all the way, Americans aren't giving you the time of the day. It doesn't matter how great your philosophy is. Because a lot of Americans still believe this is a competition among individuals. It's not just about philosophy. Right? So if you get to 5% or you get to 10%, you better be a former governor in New Mexico, or better be a professional economist who used to work for the White House, or you better have something, right? Like I said, it doesn't have to be me, but a big reason that I have a team behind me is because we believe as a group that this campaign can focus the party on what we believe is important, whether I am the nominee or not. We believe the party needs to focus on the fact that you need two things instead of debating about which one is more important. You need two things, you need both in a nominee. You need some credibility, because that's what matters outside the party. And you need bold proposals. Up until now, it seems like we're having some weird debate about one or the other, right? Like, oh, you know, we don't want someone boring and credible, because then you have to give up, you know, your boldness. What? Where is this thinking? How does one offset the other? It can't possibly offset the other because we've had nominees that are neither. So, you know they can go hand in hand in the wrong direction, right? There are people who can represent us with a background in public policy, with a background in public service, who can represent the libertarian principles that we want represented. That's what we need to go for. We learned, I would say awkwardly, 2 election cycles ago, that running a former governor can actually get you an extra bunch of percentage points even if the messaging is crappy, right? The governor, and for those of you who are fans, nice guy, good guy, mostly a libertarian guy. I don't know, what else nice can I say about Gary? Successful governor, some said. I'm out of ammo. That's as nice as I can get. Got up to 9% in a couple of those polls at one point. Is that right? Or 10? That's an enormous number for a libertarian. It wasn't because his messaging was any good. It was because he was a former governor. And not just because that made him famous. The vast majority of the United States never heard this guy. Let's be candid. It was because the news people assigned him some credibility. That was why. And so people were willing to listen to him. Imagine if he would, as we need to do, as we know we need to do, imagine if he had cleaved hard edges against the Republicans and the Democrats. If your messaging, I get this wrong, so help me out, because you're going to remember this at least as well as I do, even you youngsters, which is everybody. If your message is, we're fiscally conservative like Republicans and socially liberal like Democrats? Isn't that what he used to say? You've got no message. That is an absence of, that's a message vacuum, right? That's a blank page. You've just defined yourself in terms of the other parties. You've said nothing interesting about yourself. You've admitted that you're just some amalgam. And by the way, and I won't let Gary off the hook for this one, it's not even true. It's not true. Republicans aren't fiscally conservative. Would a Republican, by the way, would a Republican tell you that taking people's money and spending on war is evil? No, they wouldn't tell you that, but it is, and somebody needs to say that. We need to say that, right? Not just for political purposes, but because it's true. There's a big difference. Are we socially liberal like Democrats? Really? We're for these lockdowns and wokeism and awkward messaging and canceling each other over naughty words, and that doesn't sound like us. It's not even, so never mind that it's bad messaging, it's not even true, for crying out loud. We need to sharpen the edges against the other parties and make clear choices. But if you're a political party, you're trying to make a point, you're trying to discern a difference from other parties, give me the edges. Give me the edges, right? You can have the middle. I'll be the Lord of the edges. That sounds good. You don't want to be the edge lord? I'll be the edge lord. Never even heard the term until he used it, but now I like it. But I think I like the opposite. Like he says it's a bad idea. I think, I don't know, maybe it's a good idea. How else are you going to make your point? You got to make your point on the edges a little bit, don't you? When we look for common ground, we have to find common ground with the rest of Americans, not with the Republicans and the Democrats. Hello?
If you don't have a message, your message is going to blur everybody else's.
Thank you.